At the beginning of our lesson, we did some mental math that looked like this, where you canceled out a bunch of things. Now, the reason for that is that leads up into something with permutations when you're not arranging all of the objects, when you're only arranging some of them. So the example that they have on this page here is Chico has 7 songs on his iPod. Wow, that is a lot of music. But he only likes to listen to 3 songs on his way to school. He can only have time to listen to 3 songs. He wonders how many different playlists can he make, so he has a different order and different songs. And for him, listening to those songs in a different order is different. So, you know, even if it's the same 3 songs, but he's listening to it in a different order, that's different for him because of how he walks and whatnot. How many ways could he do that? Well, you could figure this out with spaces. And if you did spaces, what you would have is say, how many decisions does he have to make? He needs to decide 3 things. What's my first song? What's my second song? What's my third song? So my spaces would look like this. How many choices does he have for the first song? 7. Anything could be first. Then he's not going to listen to the same song again, then 6, then 5. So what we noticed is that this was similar to the mental math that we did at the beginning, where you could go all the way down to 1 and then divide by 4, 3, 2, 1 to have that cancel out to be left with just 7, 6, and 5. It's really not hard to just do the spaces and figure it out. But if you wanted to write this with factorial notation, this is the same as 7 factorial over 4 factorial. And if you wanted to write this with a notation that uses the ideas here, is you say, well, I started with 7 objects, and I wanted to pick 3 of them, so I could do 7 minus 3 as a way to make a formula out of this. And this is the basic formula for permutations. And we write this formula as NPR. So for, what was his name? Chico. For Chico, he has 7 objects and he wants to place 3 of them, first, second, and third. And this formula, which is on your formula sheet, says take 7 factorial and divide by 7 minus 3 factorial. So you have some multiple choice questions that are going to come up that are going to ask you, do you know how to manipulate this formula? Do you know how to work with it algebraically? So we'll do some questions like that. But for the most part, if you got a question like Chico and his songs, you would probably still go to your spaces. Say he has 3 decisions to make. How many choices for the first one? How many choices for the second one? How many choices for the third one? So here's an example. You have 8 students that are competing in a 200-meter race. Okay? And prior to the race, you want to have championship shirts made that say first place with the name, second place with the name, third place with the name. But you don't know the results. So you make all these different shirts to begin with. And then as soon as the race is done, you can come out with the winning shirt right away. And they're like, how did they make that so fast? Well, they didn't make it so fast. They made it ahead of time, right? I would actually think it would be very cool to have a collection, you know, at the end of major sporting events, like the Super Bowl or the Stanley Cup Finals. As soon as a team wins, they have hats all ready for them. I would like to have a collection of all the hats that they end up destroying because that team didn't win. I'd like to have a collection of all of those hats of the losing team that they've made them already, right? But they haven't Do you think they just destroy them all afterwards? Anyways, I don't know. Anyways, 8 students are competing in a 200-meter race. How many of these shirts would you have to make? Well, again, how many decisions would you have to make? 3. Who's going to finish first? Who's going to finish second? Who's going to finish third? How many choices do you have for first place? Any of the 8 could come in first. Then 7. Then 6. So if I was figuring this out on a test or quiz, this is how I would do it. If it was a multiple choice question and they didn't have numbers, this means the same as 8p3. And in the 8p3, one of the things you can think about is that 8 is your total number of choices. And that 3 stands for how many spaces or how many decisions you need to make. And we figured out this earlier. What was this, 336 from before? So again, we have another word problem. You have to read that word problem and decipher it as I have to do spaces for this. Now, so far, we've only learnt one strategy, the spaces strategy. And so most of these questions at the beginning of this unit, you know, when I assign 4, 6, 7, and 8, most of the questions are going to be easy because you only have one strategy to use. Life is going to get a little bit more difficult later because we're going to learn more strategies, and then you'll have to figure out which of the strategies will I use in which situation. And so these initial questions that are easy now are going to get, the same question's going to be harder later because you'll have more things that could come into play.